Hello everyone! This week's video for our Period 5 class, I'm going to go over the revised poetry project guidelines. So before you begin any work, I'd like you to go to our classwork tab and look at the first document that's posted. It's called Distance Learning Required Phase, Week of 4/20. So once you open that, it's going to have a lot of the information that I'm covering in this video. So that'll be your next step after you finish watching. So as I just said, instructions and links are in the distance learning document for this week. The biggest change in our project is that you're no longer required to write 5 poems, reflections, and illustrations. We are reducing that to 3. So you are only writing 3 poems and reflections with illustrations. Unless you would like to write an extra credit poem, you will be writing a total of 4. So I'm sure lots of you are happy about that. This I copied directly from the distance learning document. It's posted under Monday's schedule. So we are writing 3 poems. They must be 3 different types of poems. You're going to include a reflection and illustration for each of those 3. You don't need to put a title page or table of contents. We are just looking for 3 poems with a reflection and illustration each. So if you are doing a concrete poem, this is one of the exceptions, the shape on the page can count as the illustration. So if you choose a concrete poem, you will just have that poem, which takes the form of whatever object you're writing about, and its reflection. So I'll repeat this again. Note that there's no longer a required table of contents or title page. So you'd also like to review the poetry notes posted on Classroom in order to prepare for this project. So again, on the Classwork tab, it's up at the very top, it's titled Poetry Notes. Remember, there are 9 poem types to choose from, and you can identify the poem types by looking for the P in parentheses. So the 9 poem types are acrostic, concrete poem, diamante poem, epic poem, found or recycled poem, free verse poem, haiku, narrative poem, and stair poem. So you are choosing 3 different types from that list, and you can find the explanations, definitions, how to write them in the poetry notes. So one reminder is that all your poems should be on the same theme. Does not have to be the same one that you wrote down on your contract if you've forgotten about it or changed your mind. Just make sure that all 3 poems that you do write are connected and are about the same topic. So besides the few exceptions, poems should be a minimum of 10 lines. So that means you can write more than 10 lines if you would like. So for the exceptions, if you write a haiku, you're actually going to write 3 to count as 1 poem. If you choose a stair poem form, you're going to write 3 stair poems to count as 1 poem. And if you choose the diamante form, you're going to write 2 of those to count as 1 of your 3 poems. You must have 3 different types, or 4 if you're doing the extra credit, of poems. So let's say I want to write a narrative poem, a haiku, and a concrete poem. That's great. What you don't want to do is repeat the types. So I don't want to have 3 free verse poems or 2 free verse poems in an epic. You want to make sure each poem that you write is going to be a different type of poem. All right, let's talk about the reflection. So we briefly went over this when you first got the guidelines. That was a long time ago. So I pulled this directly from the guidelines that you had gotten at the beginning of our poetry unit. So you can use this as a sample for how you write your reflection. So this is in response to a poem by Robert Frost, A Time to Talk. I'll let you look over at the poem on your own time, so you can pause this video, read the poem. What I want to focus on in this video, though, is the reflection at the bottom where the red arrow is. So I'll read the reflection for you. The poem, A Time to Talk by Robert Frost, is a free verse poem. It uses line break between every 2 lines. Frost chooses to end line with a punctuation mark or comma when he feels that his statement is complete. There is rhyming between words in sentences 1 and 4, again in sentences line 3 and 7, and lines 8 and 9. For example, rode and hoed and around and ground are rhymes used as a poetic device. Imagery is used when the line says, I thrust my hoe into the mellow ground. One can visualize someone who is busy working on their farm while he debates whether or not to break to speak with someone coming up the path. The friendship between the two is evident because it tells about how even though the worker is busy, he stops to chat with a friend. So as I was reading that, I found a few typos that we could improve in grammar, but that's fine. This is a student sample. Let's look at the format and the structure of this reflection. That's what's most important here that we can learn from. This person who wrote the paragraph identifies the poetic device of rhyme, and it's named as a poetic device. This person even pulled out words that rhymed. Rode, hoed, around, ground. Then they talk about imagery, and they pull out a quote from one of the lines. And then following that quote is explanation. Imagery helps the reader visualize someone who's working and then stops to chat with a friend. So this is a great example of how you can include your evidence in the form of a line or words pulled out from the poem. You are identifying that evidence as a type of poetic device, such as rhyming or imagery, and you are commenting on that. One last note about your reflections is that you are not going to be writing a response to a poem by another author, right? You're going to be writing a response to one of your own poems. So as you are writing a poem, or as you are revising a poem that you have written, think about the requirements to include and identify poetic devices. The poetic devices are in your poetry notes. They are defined, so you're going to want to use those as you write your poems and your reflections. All right, since we have adapted the requirements for this assignment, obviously the rubric is going to change. So for your 3 original poems, reflections, and illustrations, in addition to grammar and mechanics, you're going to have a possible total of 100 points. This is going to go into your project score for your grade in Aries, so it's important that you do put in your best work and ask questions to me or Mrs. Connor if you have them. And then the extra credit opportunity is if you write an additional poem. So 15 points possible for your 4th poem, reflection, and illustration. Since we are on the topic of grading, I do want to mention this real quickly. We are entering the required phase of distance learning, so your work is going to be graded. In the distance learning document that I pointed out at the very beginning of this video, it goes through what is graded and how you can meet the requirements. So your Flipgrids, you're going to want to include thoughtful and complete responses. That means including the explanation or the why part of the question. If you have quill assigned for the week, it's going to be the average score of that activity pack. You can always retake your lessons before the deadline, before you turn them in. So if you'd like to learn from your mistakes and improve your score, that is totally up to you, and it's encouraged to do that. The historian journal, you are responsible for doing that Monday through Thursday. So you're going to have 4 journal entries that are graded each week. So again, we're not like counting sentences. You can do bullet points. You can include links and pictures, but it should be evident that you've put in some degree of thought and effort every day for that. And then depending what is assigned that week, you're going to have a writing reading assignment. So a thoughtful response could earn anywhere between an 80 and 100%. So we'll determine the points for each assignment as they come up and are assigned. But if you put in the work, you're not going to get less than an 80. Once again, each week assignments will be posted prior to the Monday when the week begins. And if you'd like your work to be on time, you're going to turn it in before midnight, so 11:59 or earlier on Thursday, though I don't want you staying up that late doing the work. So you can use the proposed schedule to get it in before then. If you have any work that you need to make up, you can do that on the Friday of the week, and we will still look at it.